Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful empowered harmonizers. We're zooming in and focusing in on a great viewer question that we just got in, and that is, how do you lead a normal life after you have been in a traumatizing relationship with someone who is narcissistic? Someone who is narcissistic has a pathological sense of self-importance, and coupled with a lack of empathy, this can be a very tumultuous relationship. One thing to understand about these people who are narcissistic is they really have a tendency to basically detract a lot of energy away from you or pull a lot of energy out of you in order to keep the relationship going. In other words, it can be somewhat destructive. It can somewhat break you down. You have to really overgive. You have to be there to keep them at the center and front headlines, the center stage. You have to talk them up. These people are the ones who need constant strokes of ego. And oftentimes people then take on a role of narcissistic supply to them. Meaning, if you go along with the program, if you go along with their egoic needs, if you are narcissistic supply, if you're there to take care of them, if you're there to, pay all their bills or, show up at all their games or be at all their shows or gigs or attend all their concerts or whatever it is where they're looking for supporters, if you are not one who is now, you've been basically you've just been completely frustrated and now at the point where you're exhausted and your life just feels like it's bottoming out. You feel like, what is in this for me? All I'm doing is giving, giving, giving. And it's gotten you out of balance. It's gotten you your neuromodular regulation is not working. One thing about, we learn as children is, you have to be able to balance work and play. Being in the school, playing in the schoolyard, playing with your friends, and doing your homework. There's a balance to life. You can't oftentimes do all or nothing. It just gets dysfunctional. You will eventually just be depleted. I think that's the word that I'm looking for. There's a sense of depletion when you are in a relationship with one of these people for a long period of time. A long period of time can be a year. It can be 2 years. It can be 10 years. One thing, though, is that as people mature and they get older for the wiser. And one thing is that, what worked back when you were in your teens or your 20s doesn't work in your 30s. And perhaps what doesn't work in your 30s might not work in your 50s. So there's this ebb and flow and change moving through life with a state of grace, where you might call this, being able to embrace reality, being able to embrace what is in your best interest, being able to, know when to rest and not feel that you're sitting too idle. You're in congruence with your values, and you're okay, taking rest. You're okay just being content. You're okay just being at peace and being still. You don't have to always be improving or changing or trying to prove something to somebody or be a specific something. You can just be. That is the beauty of life. And the beauty of life is that you get to have this balance. And the balance, you will be able to have like an internal thermostat, which will tell you, keep going, now's the time for rest, or you need to hydrate, or you need, your body will oftentimes, if you listen to it, it'll give you clues and cues as to how to best respond and nurture and feed the body. But the interesting thing about the human being in this physical life is that oftentimes the mental state can override that neuromodulation, that physiology, what you truly need. The mind has a way to trick itself and say, no, you know what, you don't need to eat. You're too fat, even though you're hungry. You don't need to sleep. You need to study. You need to cram for that next exam. You know what? You should go out and spend that money. In fact, you should go gambling even though you don't have it. So the mind has an ability to override the physiology. And when you're in a relationship with a narcissist, I feel no more often is this true when you're in a relationship with a narcissist or even someone who is psychopathic, who basically will utilize and take and extrapolate from others, all to satisfy their narcissistic or psychopathic needs. And although they're very two different types of people and personality disruptions, one thing about the relationship with a narcissist you'll often find is that there's an imbalance, there's a disharmony, there's a cognitive dissonance, and there's an incongruence of eventually what you truly need and then what you're truly doing. In other words, what you truly need is to have somebody to be there for you, to be able to do things with, to share conversation, to have communion, to have fellowship, to have celebration, to share the light, to be able to live in the light. In other words, to be warm, clear, having a strong energetic vibration and living along the right path, or what is morally upright, morally upstanding, what's in agreement with the two of you. And with a narcissist, though, this balance, I feel, gets really out of whack and it gets really disharmonious. And it's like the mind, then, if you're subject or vulnerable to this, you can begin to live a very imbalanced life to satisfy the needs of the narcissist. In fact, for a lot of people, it can really pull out the worst of them. And it can become a very, very incompatible, not feel good, uncomfortable relationship. And so to get back to a sense of normalcy, that is a great question. And I love that because it really speaks to the imbalance that is caused by a trauma bond. It causes you to not know how to regulate your own emotions, your own thinking, be able to tune into you and what is best for you and let go of what is toxic, what is poison, what is not good for you. Just like you wouldn't go and drink the floor cleaner, that it's toxic. Nobody has to, break you down, break it down and say, well, it could, and maybe if you just pinch your nose, it might do this, you would be like, no, unequivocally not, that's not getting past my lips. Sorry, forget about it. Now, with a narcissist, it's kind of like the same thing. You're kind of drinking an emotional poison, but with a little bit of flavoring syrup added to it so that you don't, quite, there's a lot of sugar coating that goes on emotionally, and it's kind of like, you're doing a lot of the sugar, while you're in the relationship, either literally or figuratively. In fact, a lot of people do, eat then a lot of sugar or non-nutritive foods, when they're, trying to cope with oftentimes the disparity or problems that this relationship is causing. They're turning to anything to cause them to feel good because the relationship has made them feel so bad about themselves, feel so bad about life, feel so bad about their future, particularly, and getting that balance of life back. And so if you are experiencing this disharmony, this out of balance, where you feel like things are in fits and starts, jumps and jolts, things aren't going through smoothly, you're doing this and then you're overcompensating, you're under, you're under here, but you're over there. This can be a sign of discongruence and disharmony, and a very sort of seesawy, sort of very cragged, rocky and rough way to maintain an internal struggle as a result of a relationship with a narcissist, someone where there has been a trauma bond inflicted. Now, it's important to know that, when did this occur for you, this sort of disharmony? When did you have to, think in order to cope? In other words, how did you have to throw your own balance, your own life balance, out of balance in order to cope with this influence or with this relationship or this series of relationships? Now, this might have occurred, through ages 0 through 7. It might occur in your teenage years, your young 20s, wherever maybe you met somebody at your job or, a class or something where, you fell in love and you did not know about narcissist, individuals, or you didn't know better. You've only known abuse. You've only known pathology. And so this just seemed to be fitting right in. It was just so familiar. This person is, on drugs, or this person is, blacked out all the time. And yep, this is just like the family that I grew up in. It's just mirror images playing itself out, acting out. And then here you find yourself in these old, familiar, comfortable roles that you've, fit in your entire life. And so this disharmony, in other words, where your thinking and your decision making had to override what was in your best interest. And you said, you know what? I'm going to take the drink anyway. You know what? I'm going to do this relationship anyway. And you know what? I'm going to do this anyway, And then so slowly it started to erode, and this, erode your self-esteem and, erode your chances of feeling that you have a good life, a stable life, a secure life. And you were taught that if you weren't perfect or you weren't X, Y, and Z to conform to the standards, well, you were certainly a nobody, especially in comparison to the narcissist. And so they have a tendency to delude and brainwash and gaslight the thinking of other people while they're in cohabitation or relationships. So, throwing your, there's a lot of information in science that says, the body has a homogeneous state. In other words, the body knows how to heal itself. The immune system will enact itself and turn on if there's a presence of a virus, and it'll be on and it'll help to fight that away. And you might feel some low energy while you're fighting off the virus, but then you'll bounce back. So there's this internal regulating system, which, like your body's thermostat or your body's own, ecosystem will work to, fight off those negative or toxins which enter the body, which are not able to be broken down, which they try to rid themselves of. And basically, this is known as, what the body tries to excrete. It tries to pull out. It will process them and not take what it does not need. So the body does have a self-regulating system to lead to balance. In other words, when it gets dark out, you want to sleep. The sun rises, you want to get up. When you're hungry, you want to eat. But somewhere along the line, there comes a place when there's a distraction, when there's a no. Deep inside in the subconscious, if you have lived under fight or flight, there is the feeling that, my body cannot regulate itself. In other words, you were taught, or you had the feeling that you were not supported. You are not enough. You are not okay. You can't make it without me. Whether this was, a husband or a teenager or a friend who was, perhaps a formative influence in your life. And, they are now, you're now basically discovering that you're growing apart, or that they're doing some things that you've like grown out of. You're like, yeah, we're not doing that. Or, why are you still, not grown up? Or how come you don't want, more and more out of life, or something better out of life? And you're beginning to question the relationship. And oftentimes this can come from an awareness. It can also come from a real imbalance in your life, where you're feeling that, you have been out of balance for so long because either you've been over obligating, over giving, making excuses for, enabling, living in denial, all these different mindsets that make up this and start to create this real imbalance. And then here comes, I've got to cope. And then life becomes nothing but a series of coping, coping, particularly if you look at like that with the coffee, now it's like you've got a Starbucks, every basically 5 blocks. I mean, you can be so addicted to coffee, yet you don't realize how addicted you are because everybody else around is, you've got a line, back and out the street because everybody's trying to get this expensive coffee. And the people don't realize how addicted they are. They just don't even question. They don't realize that this is throwing their everything out of balance. Caffeine, the way that, and the strength and the amount and frequency with which they're doing it is throwing the body out of balance. They go a couple days, here they've got this crushing headache. They can't wake up, they can't function. They've now introduced this toxin, or what can be a natural, good element, and they've overridden the fact that your body's going, enough is enough. So it's more explanations and examples of how the body, you can betray the body and betray the intuition and the gut. And this is oftentimes very much encouraged and required by a narcissist and definitely a psychopath. Where you don't learn to live in emotional self-regulation. You're not able to neuromodulate, your feelings. You don't become the master of these. You become a victim. You become a victim to the feelings. You become, like a super sleuth. You're trying to figure out, how can I prove myself to this person, or how do I keep this denial going? Or now am I living in an unlawful life because of this person through drinking or drugs or whatever it is, gambling, or, just unlawful doesn't have to only mean the law. It can mean out of the law of your own body. In other words, the body then starts doing some strange things, when its very being is threatened. Just like when a virus comes, you might have, low energy while your immune system is trying to regulate it and break it down and ward off a cold. Well, or just like someone who has an outer image, like a narcissist, they want to be, presented in a certain way. So they will do specific things to themselves, their body, whatever, to portray an image. But that causes things to be out of balance with them. In other words, especially in matters of the heart, matters of love. When we talk about true love, and you see, Valentine's Day coming up and people giving, cards and chocolates or flowers or different things of true love, eventually, you can't partake in true love with somebody who's thrown you out of balance. Eventually you're going to be like, nope, I can't give it a card this year. I can't give it flowers. I can't give this person their gift. I can't do the dinner because this is a lie. So that is really an indicator when you have overridden your own neurology and your own truth, and your subconscious mind, your body is telling you to stop. You can't carry on this way with this person or these people, or life now with them becomes life in general. You have to put an end to it. You have to put a stop. You have to look at the balance. You have to be able to say that I am now looking back and understanding where I had to override my truth in order to protect myself. In other words, where did it start? Where did it start for you? When did things begin to get out of control? It might take you way back to your childhood. It may take you back to, your infancy. It might take you back to your teenage years, and look at the thread of really how this was working for you. Where you had to then fit in and conform to another's standards that weren't really what you wanted. Yes, of course, there's, socialization and normalization where, you need to have discipline and develop really good things. In other words, train yourself, go to school, be able to have, a book to read, be able to, compute things, being able to learn a trade, being able to learn a profession, being able to carry a conversation, being able to participate in sports. These are all skills that you learn. And so you are training and teaching yourself, but it's for your own best interest, and your body will then thrive. Now, when you're in a relationship with a narcissist, oftentimes the body does not thrive. The body will break down. Even though despite your intentions, your attempts to try to hang in there for it, the body does not lie. The body will develop symptoms, feelings, and expressions which will be, screaming at you, and you've gotten your life now out of balance. So number one, you have to say, okay, enough is enough. I realize that I am playing a role. I'm playing a part in this imbalance right now. In other words, part of me, way back when, even though I don't want to admit it, agreed to doing this, agreed to people pleasing, agreed to pleasing this person, agreed to feeling less than. That's the big thing. Have you admitted to yourself that somewhere along the line you said, yep, I accept it, I'm second fiddle. Yep, I accept it, I'm backseat to this person. This person has the talent, I'm the roadie. This person, is the light of my life, and I'm just going to be the candle holder, and was I, so in other words, if you could just do and give to them, that was enough, and then you had sort of where did you, begin this sacrificing of yourself? Where did that little flicker for your own life, and what you wanted to receive and take in, where did that begin to go astray and get dimmed a little bit? Because it's important for you to recognize during your own life, when did this begin to break down? Under what circumstances? Who are the players? Who are the people? What did you do? How did you sort of then feed into that? Well, unless I do this, I am not good enough. Where did you learn to feel that way, decide that way, and become that way? So if we repeat these over and over and over, a feeling becomes a mood, becomes a temperament, becomes a personality, becomes an identity. So if this has been working and causing you, like you said, in your relationship for some time, where you've been thrown out of balance, is to know that the imbalance started somewhere. So this has a beginning, and likewise it can have an end. But having the awareness and having the ability and the strength to look back and saying, okay, I admit this is, even though this might have been a reaction, oftentimes imbalance is a reaction. So look at these as periods of time, and we have to cut the tape short now. I apologize. It's your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today, and I hope that these